In the early 1920s, America was drunk on progress. Not the kind of drunk you get from whiskey, the kind you get from believing you can do anything. And in Chicago, that belief was poured into steel and concrete. The city was rising from the mud of the prairie, and every new building was a middle finger to gravity itself. Architects became rock stars. Engineers became kings. And the money flowed like water. But here's the thing about building tall. When you reach for the sky, the fall is that much harder. And nobody back then was thinking about falling. They were thinking about records, about being the first, about getting their name carved into a cornerstone that would outlive their great-grandchildren. That was the dream. That was the American promise. Enter our man. Let's call him Walter. Walter was a structural engineer from Pennsylvania, sharp as a tack, educated in Europe, spoke 3 languages. He had the kind of resume that made construction companies fight over him. And in 1926, he got the offer of a lifetime. A massive new project in Chicago. A commercial tower that was supposed to change the skyline forever. Walter took the job. He moved into a small apartment near the site. Every morning, he'd walk past the hole in the ground and watch the workers pour the first footings. He'd nod at the foreman. He'd smile at the ironworkers. Nobody suspected a thing. Why would they? He was the genius, the man with the answers. But Walter had secrets, and secrets have a way of leaking out, even when you think you've sealed them tight. The first sign came in the summer of 1927. A foreman named Patrick O. Neil was checking the rebar placement on the 5th floor. Patrick was a lifer, 20 years in the trades. He could look at a beam and tell you if it was off by a 1/4 inch. And something felt wrong. The steel didn't have the usual stamp. The grade markings were faint, almost like they'd been ground off and re-stamped. Patrick mentioned it to his supervisor. The supervisor said, "Don't worry about it." Walter approved the order. So Patrick went to Walter directly. Walter looked him dead in the eye and said, "Patrick, I appreciate your concern, but I ran the numbers 3 times. It's fine. Go back to work." In the early 1920s, America was drunk on progress. Not the kind of drunk you get from whiskey, the kind you get from believing you can do anything. And in Chicago, that belief was poured into steel and concrete. The city was rising from the mud of the prairie. And every new building was a middle finger to gravity itself. Architects became rock stars. Engineers became kings. And the money flowed like water. But here's the thing about building tall. When you reach for the sky, the fall is that much harder. And nobody back then was thinking about falling. They were thinking about records, about being the first, about getting their name carved into a cornerstone that would outlive their great-grandchildren. That was the dream. That was the American promise. Enter our man. Let's call him Walter. Walter was a structural engineer from Pennsylvania, sharp as a tack, educated in Europe, spoke 3 languages. He had the kind of resume that made construction companies fight over him. And in 1926, he got the offer of a lifetime. A massive new project in Chicago. A commercial tower that was supposed to change the skyline forever. Walter took the job. He moved into a small apartment near the site. Every morning, he'd walk past the hole in the ground and watch the workers pour the first footings. He'd nod at the foreman. He'd smile at the ironworkers. Nobody suspected a thing. Why would they? He was the genius, the man with the answers. But Walter had secrets, and secrets have a way of leaking out, even when you think you've sealed them tight. The first sign came in the summer of 1927. A foreman named Patrick O. Neil was checking the rebar placement on the 10th floor. Patrick was a lifer. 20 years in the trades. He could look at a beam and tell you if it was off by a 1/4 inch. And something felt wrong. The steel didn't have the usual stamp. The grade markings were faint, almost like they'd been ground off and re-stamped. Patrick mentioned it to his supervisor. The supervisor said, "Don't worry about it." Walter approved the order, so Patrick went to Walter directly. Walter looked him dead in the eye and said, "Patrick, I appreciate your concern, but I ran the numbers 3 times. It's fine. Go back to work." Patrick didn't go back to work. He went to a bar, and over a cheap beer, he told his buddy about the steel. His buddy said, "You're crazy. Walter's the best we've got. If he says it's fine, it's fine." And maybe that's what made Patrick so uneasy. Because Walter wasn't just confident. He was too confident. The kind of confidence that doesn't leave room for questions. Over the next few months, Patrick started paying closer attention. He kept a small notebook in his pocket. Every time he saw something weird, a weld that looked rushed, a bolt that was undersized, he wrote it down. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to sleep at night. Meanwhile, Walter was spending more and more time in his office. The door was always closed. His secretary told people he was on the phone with overseas clients. But when Patrick walked past late one evening, he heard Walter speaking in German, and he caught a phrase that chilled him. Die Lieferung ist sicher. The delivery is safe. Delivery of what? Steel? Money? Patrick didn't know. But he started making copies of every document he could get his hands on. By November of 27, the building was up to the 30th floor. And that's when the cracks started showing. Not in the walls, in the floor slabs. Hairline fractures that nobody could explain. The concrete supplier said it was a curing issue. The steel mill said it was a fabrication issue. Everyone pointed fingers. But Walter shut them all down. He said, "I'll rerun the calculation. Give me a week." That week turned into a month. And during that month, Patrick broke into Walter's office. He found a locked drawer. He picked the lock, don't ask me how, and inside he found bank statements. Swiss accounts. Deposits that didn't match Walter's salary. Huge deposits. The kind of money that buys silence. Patrick photocopied everything and sent it to the project owner. Anonymous envelope. No return address. The owner called a meeting. Walter was there. Patrick was there. The lawyers were there, and the owner asked, "Does anyone know why these bank records are in my mailbox?" Walter went pale. He said, "I've been framed," but he couldn't explain the deposits. He couldn't explain the German phone calls. He couldn't explain the mislabeled steel. Then came the bombshell. The European steel mill that supplied the materials had a known connection to a rival, Construction Consortium, a consortium that had lost a major bid to the Chicago project. They wanted revenge, and Walter, for reasons we still don't fully understand, had taken their money. But here's where the story gets weird. Walter wasn't greedy. He lived modestly. He drove a 10-year-old car. He wore the same coat every winter. So what was the point? Why betray everything you've worked for? Some historians think it was ideology. Walter had studied in Germany. He'd seen the rise of a new kind of engineering one that prized efficiency over longevity. He believed American buildings were overbuilt, wasteful. He thought he could prove that you could build just as safely with less material. But he was wrong, and instead of admitting his mistake, he doubled down. Others think it was coercion. Maybe someone had leverage on him. A secret, an affair, a gambling debt. We'll never know. But the evidence is clear. Walter deliberately weakened that building. He knew the concrete was below spec. He knew the steel was substandard, and he signed off anyway. Patrick O'Neill didn't let it go. He went to the press. He gave interviews. He became a folk hero, and the public demanded answers. The trial started in 1928. It was a circus. Reporters from all over the country packed the courtroom. Walter sat at the defense table with a blank expression. He barely spoke. He barely moved. It was like he'd already checked out. Witness after witness testified. Workers described seeing Walter change orders at the last minute. Secretaries described shredding documents. One of his students from the university even testified that Walter had once said, "A building doesn't need to last forever. It just needs to outlast the mortgage." That line made headlines. It was quoted in every paper. People were furious. How could a man who'd been trusted with public safety be so cavalier? But Walter's lawyers had a defense. They argued that Walter was a visionary ahead of his time, that the building was never meant to be a monument, it was meant to be a prototype, a test case for a new, leaner style of construction. The judge wasn't buying it. Neither was the jury. But before they could deliver a verdict, something happened. On a cold February night, Walter died in his cell. They said it was a heart attack. Walter had been poisoned, not with something obvious, something slow, something that could be mistaken for natural causes. Nobody was ever charged. The investigation was quietly closed. The official record says death by natural causes. But Patrick O'Neill never believed it. He said they killed him to keep the story quiet. They didn't want the truth about that. Steele getting out, and maybe he was right, because in 1930, the building was partially demolished. Not because it was unsafe, but because nobody wanted to be associated with it anymore. They left the bottom 7 floors standing, turned it into a warehouse, and for decades, nobody talked about it. But the story didn't disappear. It festered. In the 1950s, a young architect named Michael was digging through old archives at the Chicago Historical Society. He found a folder labeled Construction Scandal, 1928. Inside were photos, blueprints, handwritten notes, and a letter from Walter to an unknown recipient. The letter read, "I am not the villain history will make me. I am a scientist. I wanted to prove that our obsession with safety margin is killing innovation. We use twice the steel we need, 3 times the concrete. It's a religion, not an engineering principle. I took their money because they promised to let me build. To really build. Not just copy-paste the same designs over and over." Michael was stunned. He showed the letter to his professor, who told him to bury it. "This is radioactive," the professor said. "You'll destroy your career if you publish this." He brought it to the city council, and that's when the second wave of controversy hit. Suddenly people were asking, was Walter actually wrong? Was the building really unsafe, or did we just not have the courage to test his theory? It's a painful question, because if Walter was right, then we wasted billions of dollars on unnecessary materials. But if he was wrong, he gambled with human lives. The city council held hearings. Engineers from around the world flew in. The debate got ugly. Death threats, accusations, few historians received anonymous letters warning them to drop the subject. In 1955, Michael published a paper. He didn't take sides. He just laid out the facts. The steel was weaker than spec. The concrete was too porous, and the joints were under-engineered. But he also pointed out that, according to modern simulations, the building would likely have stood for at least 50 years. It wasn't a death trap. It was just less safe. So where's the betrayal? The betrayal, Michael argued, was in the cover-up. Walter wasn't a hero or a villain. He was a man who tried something dangerous and got caught. But the real damage wasn't to the building. It was to trust. Because after the trial, every inspector, every architect, every foreman started second-guessing themselves. The industry became paranoid. Safety margins doubled. Costs tripled. Some say that paranoia saved lives. And that's the dilemma at the heart of this story. How much risk is acceptable? How much innovation is worth a little uncertainty? Walter's building is gone now. The warehouse was demolished in 1984. But under the foundation, workers found that metal capsule we mentioned earlier. The letter inside was short. It said, "If you're reading this, then concrete betrayed me before I could betray it." I wasn't building for my time. I was building for eternity. But eternity doesn't forgive shortcuts. After that, the letter ends. The rest is missing. Torn away? Burned? Nobody knows. But here's what we do know. The American construction industry changed forever after 28. The codes got stricter. The testing got tougher. And the word Walter became shorthand for corruption. Even today, when an engineer cuts corners, someone says, "Don't pull a Walter." And yet, there's a part of me that wonders, what if Walter's ideas weren't insane? What if, in some parallel world, his vision caught on, and we built cities with half the resources and twice the elegance? Would we be better off? Or would we be living in rubble? There's no easy answer, but there is a lesson. And the lesson is about honesty, not just with your clients or your regulators, but with yourself. Did Walter believe he was doing the right thing? I think he did, in his own twisted way. But he convinced himself that the ends justified the means. And that's the most dangerous kind of self-deception, because the means matter. The process matters. The details matter. When you're building something people rely on, you don't cut corners and call it innovation. You don't change the recipe and call it optimization. You don't pocket the difference and call it efficiency. Patrick O'Neill knew that. He was a simple foreman with a notebook and a gut feeling. He didn't have a fancy degree. He didn't speak German, but he knew right from wrong. And when he saw something that didn't add up, he didn't look away. That's the real hero, not the architect, not the engineer, not the lawyers. The foreman, the guy who touched the steel, the guy who felt the bolts and said, "This isn't right." We remember Patrick O'Neill because he was ordinary. And ordinary people, when they speak up, can change the world. The consortium that paid Walter never faced consequences. No extradition, no fines. No public shame. They went back to business as usual, but their reputation was tarnished. American firms refused to work with them. Trust was gone, and trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. I think about this story often, especially when I see modern infrastructure, the bridges, the tunnels, the skyscrapers. We assume they're safe because someone did the math. But every now and then, a building collapses. A bridge gives way. A dam fails. And we ask, how could this happen? The answer is always the same. Someone made a choice. A choice to save money. A choice to save time. A choice to ignore a warning. Not always out of malice. Sometimes out of pressure. Sometimes out of arrogance. But the result is always the same. People get hurt. Lives get lost. Communities get torn apart. The Great Betrayal wasn't just one man's sin. It was systemic failure. Failure of oversight. Failure of accountability. Walter didn't act alone. He had enablers, supervisors who looked away, inspectors who didn't inspect, accountants who didn't audit, a whole chain of people who chose to trust rather than verify. But Patrick didn't trust. He verified. That made all the difference. So next time you walk past a construction site, take a moment. Look at the workers. Look at the rebar. Look at the concrete. Every piece represents a choice. A choice to do it right, or a choice to do it cheap. Most of the time they do it right. The codes hold. The buildings stand. But once in a while someone takes a shortcut. That's when we need another Patrick O'Neill. Someone willing to ask the question. Someone willing to risk everything to tell the truth. That's the legacy of the Chicago Whisper. Not the building that almost fell, but the voice that refused to be silenced. And maybe that's enough.